Good afternoon, America. I'm Ann Smollon, and this is Come Together Conversations. Since the beginning of time, human beings have been searching for peace of mind. There is a growing interest across America of people who are keenly aware that internal peace can only be found through transformative processes. Individuals who are turned off to staring at cell phones, computers, and TVs, and turned on to practices that lead to self-fulfillment and peace. Today, our guest is a true master in the understanding of improvisation and meditation and how these can become a spiritual path to life and music. Having a master's degree in music and composition, he is a virtuoso jazz pianist, composer, arranger, and recording artist. As the founder of Grand Piano Studio, he is continuously initiating new programs for his students that are designed from his decades of experience. His background includes performing with such legendary big bands as Glenn Miller, the Bob Crosby Orchestra, and with great contemporary jazz musicians such as Sonny Fortune, Linda Hopkins, Eddie Daniels, and Joe Lovano. You can hear his recording of Visions Within, performed by the acclaimed New York Voices and narrated by Meryl Streep, along with his CD jazz recordings titled McDougal Street, NYC, where 33 professional New York-based musicians are featured. His passion and tenacity are not only seen in his highly refined compositions, but also in his life as a social activist. His vision and compassion compelled him to organize and lead 2 coalitions on Long Island, at least, one focusing on racism and poverty, and the other resulted in the shutdown of the Long Island Brookhaven Lab nuclear reactor. And in 2003, correct? He developed a gang prevention and alternative living program. I have personally had the privilege of knowing Mr. Robert Lepley for more than 10 years, and I have heard him perform live more than 75 times. Robert, I'm so happy to have you here today. Why don't we just begin wherever you'd like to begin, with whichever topic I just touched on. How about we talk about your background in social activism?
Thank you, Ann, for having me here. I really appreciate it. I'm very happy to be here. Social activism.
I started in high school. It was the war in Vietnam. I graduated from high school
In 1967, the height of the Vietnam War. And that politicized me because I began to understand what war was about. It's about acquiring goods and services and all kinds of technology, and especially minerals from the earth that furthers, capitalism here in this country and in the West. And just the brutality of that war, it really affected me. And so I became an activist opposing the war. I had friends who couldn't afford to go to college, who were drafted right out of high school, and some of those friends didn't return. So that was the beginning. After that, I continued in a lot of different areas with working with areas including drugs, drug prevention, education issues, anti-war work, especially a lot of that.
Right.
You mentioned the gang prevention and intervention.
So,
anti-racist work.
how long have you been on Long Island?
I moved here from Greenwich Village with my wife in 1990.
1990?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I have a photo of Long Island Alliance for Peaceful Alternatives
That's right.
that I believe you organized and led.
I didn't organize it. It had been an anti-war peace organization for many years. It was
Right.
first organized by some professors at Hofstra University.
Can you comment on this slide here?
We were involved in organizing to educate people about the, military incursion by the United States in Iraq, on the pretext that there were weapons of mass destruction, which there weren't. And
that's you on the right?
that's me on the right. Ghazi Khan is an imam, Muslim imam on the left. And we did a lot of public speaking about that. I mean, for instance, there were, talk about Iraqi youth. UNICEF reported that there were, between the war and the aftermath, over 500,000 children under the age 5 who died as a result of that war. So most Americans don't really know the extent of the brutality of that war. There were hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians killed during the war.
Yeah.
And it was the job of the Long Island Alliance to educate people about those kinds of things and about the tremendous amount of money that comes out of the U.S. budget for military expenditures.
Let's bring up another slide from the, that's an anti-execution hunger strike.
Yeah,
Is that part of the Long Island Alliance?
Yes, we were doing various different issues. One was against hunger,
Yeah.
and especially against the hunger strike was about the death penalty, and we were protesting against that. So we all protested that way.
So, Robert, you have a heart that is passionate about caring for people who are oppressed or being mistreated. Where did that come from? That's really a value that you carry.
It came from my parents, certainly. I was brought up in the United Methodist Church, and I learned that certainly in terms of religion, whatever flavor of religion it is, that the primary thing we have to do is serve people and care for people. And if people are suffering, we also need to be able to take an active role in discovering the root causes of their suffering and go after those root causes and fight them if necessary, nonviolently.
And so there was an organization called Upsurge, United People for Social, Economic, and Racial Justice.
That's right. That's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? And you can bring up one of those slides, please.
Upsurge ended up being a coalition of over 50 organizations.
This is you?
Yes, I'm on the left. A wonderful activist in the middle, Diana Coleman, was part of that, and she has since passed. The man on the right is Fred Brewington, the leading civil rights attorney on Long Island, who is in Newsday on Channel 12 very, very often. I was the lead organizer in establishing this coalition, and we had some major victories.
There you are in the bottom right, right?
Yes, that's right.
And who is that at the top?
That's one of the tenant organizers that was involved in this. Because
He's saying there, I have more confidence in this organization than any organization that I have worked with.
Well, we were able to have some major victories, there's no doubt about it. At that time, when a person was evicted in Hempstead, the police would come and take all the possessions and put them on the street where they were stolen. We were tipped off that there was an elderly woman who was being evicted during a snowstorm. So we called the media. They were there filming it, and then we were able to go to the Nassau legislature to require landlords to help out with the situation. And they
Very,
did.
very meaningful.
Yeah, and we won some other victories too.
I'd like to understand how you got into music, because that's a big jump from social activism into music, or is it? What bridges that?
Well, it all involves feeling and emotion and commitment and wanting to do something good in the world. You know, certainly my mother was a classical violinist, and when I was 4 years old, she would sit me down at the piano bench and she'd take out what she called her fiddle. And she'd say, okay, I'm going to play a little line on the fiddle, and you see if you can play something on the piano that fits. And she'd go, bop-a-dip, do-bop-bop-bop-a-dip, and I go, trying to figure out what the heck she was doing. So then I started.
That is a very natural way to begin influencing a child musically and fun.
Yeah. She also played what she called barroom piano. In other words, she played all the standard jazz songs of the day.
You know, Robert, as I said in my introduction, I've seen you over 75 times, and something that stands out in your playing is your excitement. And the same thing that I see in you when you're playing live, I just saw when you referred to your mom.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, she
So
was.
I guess she instilled that excitement about music.
Absolutely.
In you.
She loved life. She loved people. She loved music, and she was a great inspiration for me.
And what was her name?
Lois.
Nice.
My dad's name was Hiram, and their nicknames were High and Low. And they were both characters.
They must have been very proud of you and your accomplishments.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Let's, before we end this part of our interview, because we are coming back, I would like to play one of your compositions. Which one might that be? Did we decide?
I think it's McDougal Street, NYC. It's the title cut of my last jazz record called McDougal Street, NYC.
Okay, let's play that, and then we will come back and play a little bit more.
Hi, I'm Arthur Lee, founder, CEO, and inventor of LifeVac, a simple rescue device that can save a child's life in a choking emergency. All these people were saved with LifeVac. People may not realize that on average, 14 people a day die from choking-related incidents. Every 5 days, one of those is a child. As simple as place, push, pull.
To learn more, please visit lifevac.net.
Okay, so we're back. I'm Ann Smollon. This is Come Together Conversations, interviewing Mr. Robert Lepley, who I know would prefer to be called just Robert. We talked about one of his compositions, so let's bring up that slide of McDougal Street, NYC. And now you are in for a big surprise as we play that song, which is the title of the CD. So Robert, tell us a little bit about the process of recording that song.
Well, it's normal processes in a recording studio, not so much different than what we're doing now, except it's with musicians. The process of composing it was the process of hearing melodic lines and seeing how those would interface with the chord structures and rhythms. And it's a wonderful creative process to be involved in. Very satisfying and very fulfilling. Can be very frustrating because oftentimes you end up with lots of crinkled up pages around you on the floor. In the old days when you wrote on paper.
Yeah. Do you still do that?
On paper?
Yeah.
Sometimes I do, depending. I usually write on the computer though.
So that is a nice photo of you standing in front of the street sign, McDougal Street. Who took that photo?
My son.
Ah.
Yes, my wife and I. My son at this time had moved on. He was an adult, and we lived on McDougal between 3rd and Bleecker, the center of the world. The Blue Note was right around the corner.
Wow.
I could walk out the door and either play gigs in the neighborhood or hop on a subway and play. And I played all over Manhattan and Brooklyn for years. It's a wonderful place to live.
Did you run into any other musicians while you were there?
Yeah, quite a few
Of course you
musicians in New York City. That's right. It was a 6th-floor walk-up. The bathtub was in the kitchen.
Wow.
Yeah, it was as typical of the architecture during the years that these buildings were built down there. So it was great. It was a wonderful place to live.
Yeah. And you've been on Long Island, you said, since the 1990s?
Well, we moved to Long Island in 1990, but we lived in New York City from 1980 to 1990.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you have the Grand Piano Studio?
That is the name of the studio. It's where I teach, yes.
And I have a slide here that I pulled off of your website, and it's called The Method. So this is 3 ideas that create integration, equal integration of 3 parts, and that's music theory, improvisation, and reading music?
That's right, yeah. Most music teachers, piano teachers, and so on usually just focus on reading music. Certainly classical piano teachers usually do that. But I also teach music theory, and then applied music theory is used in improvisation, because improvisation isn't just snatching sounds out of the air. It's based on theory of music. It's many theories of music. It's based on matching up chords with scales. Each chord will use a different scale for the improvisation of melodic lines. So, there's a lot to teaching that.
What is your definition of improvisation?
Creating music in the moment. Right, exactly.
Yeah. And so, why is that important?
To create music in the moment?
Yeah.
Well, it's such a well-developed art form that has been around since music came about, certainly.
And if you were to say creating music in the moment as opposed to what?
Composition, which in essence you are creating music in the moment, but normally you write it down on paper.
Okay.
Many composers actually compose by improvising. So for a pianist would sit down at the piano and start improvising chords and melodic lines. And then you get to a point where you go, I like that. And then if you put it on paper, on a computer, then improvisation becomes transformed into composition, music composition.
And how does this improvisation experience translate into the experience of your students? Like, how do you teach them that?
Through teaching music theory and teaching them, it's a long process. First of all, teaching them how to build chords, how to structure chords, and then how to practice the scales. But in classical music, you practice the scales up and down, right? Well, in order to learn them, you have to do that. But in jazz or any other form of improvised music, we don't play scales up and down. We improvise, we create melodic lines out of those scales. So when I teach a person a diminished scale, for instance, I have them start by playing it up and down, but then I ask them to mix up the notes. And then I ask them to start creating melodic lines. And then the further step from that is by creating melodic lines that make sense, that tell stories. And the process of that is called theme and variation.
And did you write this course? These ideas come from you?
The ideas don't come from me. No, they're tried and true ideas that have to do with teaching improvised music for a long, long time.
But you're bringing them together in a particular way?
Yeah. I think every teacher has their own particular way that they bring them together.
Yeah. And so you use the word meditation with improvisation. How do you say it?
Improvisation?
Improvisation.
Right, that's
And so
right.
how do meditation and improvisation interface?
Well, I just am releasing an 18-video course on improvisation and
Yeah.
meditation. It's called Improvisation and Meditation, A Spiritual Path to Music and Life. In order to be a really good improviser, of course you need to know music theory. But knowing music theory isn't enough. You have to really be able to focus and concentrate in the moment in order to create melodic lines that make sense, that aren't just fragments. And good musicians will tell you that in order to play in the moment, you have to be in the moment. And that's what meditation teaches. Meditation teaches the form of focused concentration that is needed to be a great improviser. For instance, when you're improvising music, you have to concentrate and focus so that you remember what you played, what you improvised 10 seconds ago, and 20 seconds ago, and a minute ago. If your lines are not just going to be separate fragments, they have to have theme and variations of themes in it, so that it makes sense, so that they tell stories. And that's the reason I combined meditation with with music. It's a non-religious form of meditation.
So I've heard of all different types of meditation. How many meditations do you think there actually are?
Well, there are many names for meditation.
Right.
But if you do a thorough study of meditation, which I did during seminary back in the 70s, there's really only two forms of meditation, and they depend on what you're doing with your brain when you're meditating. You're either thinking thoughts or you're not thinking thoughts. So there's two basic forms of meditation. Many different variations of it, but just two forms. One form we can call quieting thoughts. The other form we would call watching thoughts. Now, quieting thoughts, it's a concentrative form of meditation. It can be very relaxing, because especially if our mind is full of anxious thoughts, of depressed thoughts, and so on.
Right.
Getting out of our brains, basically, and having our brains just focus on one thing. And that one thing in meditation is normally either your breath slowly going in and out, or what is called a mantra, which is a word or a phrase that has some deep meaning for you. So in the meditation called quieting the thoughts, I teach both forms of meditation. I'll get to the other one in a second, by using what I call awareness points. There's a difference between awareness and concentration. Concentration is focus on just one thing. Awareness can be awareness of sounds around you, even when you're concentrating on just one thing. So, for instance, the way I use an awareness point in concentrative, in quieting your thoughts, is to be aware of the very first moment that a thought forms in your mind. Because when that happens, you're not meditating anymore, you're thinking. Also, to be aware of when you get lost in your thoughts, in your stream of consciousness. So, the second form can be known as watching thoughts. And that's the oldest form of self-therapy that has ever existed. You're a therapist, so this would be of interest to you, definitely.
Definitely.
And in the West, in the East, it's usually known as Vipassana. In the West, it's usually translated as mindfulness. And watching thoughts involves starting again with your breath and focusing on your breath or a mantra. And the first awareness point that you want to look at is the first moment that you actually get swept up in your thoughts, because then you're no longer watching your thoughts.
And this is interfaced, happening at the same time that you're playing?
Yes, and in my course, one of the primary objectives is to say to people that playing and improvising music is a form of meditation, and you should be in a state of meditation when you're doing it. Let me say a little bit more about watching thoughts.
Yes.
Watching
it's a really
thoughts,
interesting concept.
it's a very interesting concept.
It's a very necessary practice to know about if a person is truly interested in finding internal peace.
Absolutely, and where that comes from is, there's a dance that goes on inside of all this. It's the dance between thoughts and emotion. A thought triggers an emotion triggers a thought. And that dance goes on every day of our lives, and every evening and night when we're sleeping, and we're often not aware of that dance. We don't understand it. We are just simply usually caught up with an emotion. You can be sitting on your couch watching a great video. All of a sudden you have a thought, oh my God, my rent check is going to bounce. And now all of a sudden that's the thought. It's a fear-based thought. That can lead to another fear-based thought that's not even related to the rent check, but fear is bringing on those thoughts. That's the kind of thing that happens all the time. If that continues to happen, it can lead to a spiral of depression. Watching thoughts is the oldest form of self-therapy, because as Socrates said, we have to know ourselves, and that's what this form of meditation does. It's very valuable for that. So
when you're directing or facilitating one of your students to use this method, what would you say to him or her?
Which method, the first or second method?
The integration of watching your thoughts and then improvisation.
Well, in terms of if one is just meditating, watching thoughts, I use, again, what I call awareness points. One of them is to look and see where your thoughts go.
So
They go
do you
somewhere.
do meditation separately, and then you bring them into the music, playing their instrument, or is it happening together?
I teach my students how to meditate, first of all.
Okay.
That has to be done, and it has to be practiced, just like music has to be practiced. And then I teach them how to incorporate into improvisation, how to incorporate it. Because again, it is the concentration, the focus that meditation teaches that is very necessary to be a really great improviser.
Yeah. That is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. It sounds fun also.
It's fun. It's work too. I mean, it's like anything else. You work at it. Practicing the piano is not necessarily fun.
Right.
It can be exciting.
Right.
Practicing anything over and over again can be tedious, but it leads to great results if one stays with it.
So let's end this segment, this part of this interview. And I'm Ann Smollon. This is Come Together Conversations. And when we come back, we're going to play a piece of music that Robert wrote and recorded, and it's called The Fourth Blues, and we will be right back. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Michael Astor, a New York personal injury lawyer at Astor Law. I've spent the past 30 years fighting for New Yorkers who have been injured or lost a loved one due to the fault of others. At Astor Law, we help accident victims. We have a track record of success with some of the largest settlements and jury verdicts in America. At my firm, we provide New Yorkers with a free consultation. And if you hire us, you don't pay us until we win money for you. If you or someone you know has been injured in an accident, give us a call. At Astor Law, quality service doesn't cost, it pays.
So here we are. I'm Ann Smollon. This is Come Together Conversations, interviewing Mr. Robert Lepley. And as promised, we are going to start with his composition called Fourth Blues, and we can also bring up that screenshot of Robert. Okay, folks, so as you can hear, we have the real deal here. So, Robert, you wrote that piece?
I did.
And was there something that inspired you?
The interval of the fourth.
I don't know what that means.
If you go up a scale, boom, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, boom, and if you do a series of fours, you go boom, 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 like that. So that's based on that do-ba-da, do-ba-da, do-ba-da-da. It's fourths. And it's in the form of a 12-bar blues with parts of it use what are called modal blues, another series of chord changes Charlie Parker composed called bird blues. So, yeah.
So when I've seen you out, it looks like you're in a place of meditation when you're playing. You just look like you're in a state of flow. It must go beyond theory. You must, your brain, like if they were to put an EEG on you while you're playing, or is it electroencephalograph or electroencephalograph, and kind of read a person's brainwave activity while they're in that state of playing in such a advanced way, I bet the brain waves would move into some kind of a state of meditation?
Well, yeah, because look, if you're improvising music, or even if you're just performing classical music, your enemy is thought. You do not want to be thinking when you're performing. You want to be completely attaching yourself to the music. You become the music.
That's a hard concept, I would think, to explain to your students.
No, no. I tell them that you do all your thinking when you're at home practicing. That's when you're figuring stuff out. You're figuring out how to voice chords, how to lay them out on the keyboard. You're figuring out how to do theme and variation. You're figuring out 100 other different things, and you do all that thinking at home. But when you're performing, you completely become absorbed in the music. But you become one. As I said earlier, in order to play in the moment, you have to be in the moment. And that's why I teach meditation with this, because through learning to meditate, you learn to suspend your thoughts so that you can put yourself completely in the music. Because if you're
That
improvising,
almost sounds like what I do with my clients, where I encourage them to allow the conscious mind to go somewhere else and allow the unconscious mind to take over responsibility.
yeah, I think it is very similar. And mindfulness techniques are very much used in theory, in therapy today. Mindfulness-based techniques, and that's exactly right. What you said.
So the unconscious mind and all of that work they've done beforehand just begins to come forward while they're actually performing the song?
Not exactly. What happens is that I don't think it's really the unconscious mind. It's really just the absence of thought. Because in the unconscious mind, there is thinking going on. It is there. It's moving somewhere to somewhere. But this is actually just the suspension of thought. And in order to do that, it takes practice. Because our natural tendency is for our brains to go all the time.
So let's bring up that slide of Robert with his two fellow musicians. Where is this from?
Oh, that was actually taken at a yacht club in Center Island on Long Island called Sawanica. It's my friend Kevin and Dominic there, and it's on my website when you first come in to look at this.
Yeah.
And it's the beginning of an explanation that I go into. My good friend Joseph Amato, who was with me all during this process, doing all of the videoing and the editing, and he's also a great wordsmith, great word editor, did these videos and helped me with it. And thanks, Joe. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah. No, you were telling me about all of his participation in the development of your course.
Absolutely.
So there's a photo of you at a recording studio called Cappy's. Can we bring that up?
Yeah, Cappy's is it's a great jazz pianist named Michael Capabianco has a recording studio. That's his wonderful Steinway grand piano. That's where I did my my recording, McDougal Street, NYC.
Where did you do the recording of Visions Within? Can you bring that? Okay, that's a nice photo too, right there. That's Robert.
That's a very famous jazz club in Harlem called Minton's. And you can't see all of the mural behind me, but it's all jazz oriented. A very famous jazz club. A lot of photographs.
What is that one piece sticking up behind you? It looks like a brass bed.
It just might be. Jazz is a very sensual art form.
Beautiful, beautiful photo.
That was taken when I was playing a concert at the African American Museum in Hempstead. If you've never been to the African American Museum, definitely go. I went there, first time I went there was a display of the actual Amistad, the boat that the slaves, one of the boats that the slaves were brought in from Africa.
Wow.
Wonderful place, great art, and just, yeah, wonderful place.
Can we bring up the slide of Visions Within, the CD cover?
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell us a little bit about this? This was narrated by Meryl Streep, right?
Yes, yes. She kept calling me on the phone all the time and saying, "Man, I really need some more work. Can you throw something at me?" I said, "Come on, Meryl." No, that's not true. That's a big fat lie. No, I ended up recording it with a record company that's owned by Warner, and she had worked for Warner, and they lined her up. What it is
Well,
I
I've
took.
actually listened to that entire CD. Because I have that CD, I just popped it into my car.
Oh yeah, good.
It is beautiful.
Good.
It is amazing. It is ethereal, heavenly, and it was almost as if it was inspiring me not to pray, but it is almost like a prayer. It's really nice.
Well, thank you. It's I took 6 poems of the German turn-of-the-century poet named Rainer Maria Rilke, a very spiritual poet. And I set it to music for the amazing vocal group called the New York Voices, just one of the most wonderful jazz vocal groups on this planet. They can sing anything, and they recorded it, and it's kind of talked about as Gregorian chant meets the new millennium. It was recorded in the early '90s in New Jersey at a studio named Mohawk Recording Studio, and it was released then in 1995.
And where can people find that to listen to it?
MSR, well, you can find it, on Amazon. I believe iTunes has it. It's MSR Records. You can also get it there.
And just put in Visions Within?
Visions Within, with my name, Robert Lepley, or Meryl Streep, it'll come up.
I would encourage anybody who has not yet heard it to listen to it. It's quite the experience. So this is Come Together Conversations. I'm Ann Smollon interviewing Robert Lepley, and we will be right back for the last part of this interview. Don't go away.
Ballas Associates, sales, service, and support for all your computer and PC networking needs. Whether it's wired or wireless, upgrades or repairs, backup or disaster recovery, we can provide the solutions to all your PC needs. No need to get frustrated. You know a guy. Just call Ballas Associates at 203-792-2300. That's 203-792-2300. Or visit them online at ballasassociates.com.
Okay. Hello, folks. We are back with the last segment of my interview with Robert Lepley, and we're going to go right into one of his composition. Well, it's actually you playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, or is it just called Over the Rainbow?
It's called Over the Rainbow. Harold Arlen wrote it.
Okay.
The music.
Okay. So can we play that, please?
great song. The,
What year did you record that?
that was in 2017. There was a New York Times poll taken a number of years ago, and turned out that that was by far the favorite song of the American people at that time.
Wow.
Followed by Paul McCartney's "Yesterday."
Wow. 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 So, can you tell me one of your stories about teaching a student and some satisfaction that you got from seeing them accomplish what they had been trying to do through these methods that you use?
Yeah, I had a piano student named David DeBico, actually, and he lives in Bayville. And his dad's a great singer that I've worked with before. So I started teaching David, I guess, when he was maybe 8, and I had been playing these gigs with his father, and he eventually got to the point where he replaced me on the gig. So now it's his gig. He took that gig away from me. David, I call him Blues Man.
If you're listening,
I
must be.
I call him the Blues Man, and now he plays, and he's just a marvelous pianist now.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So, if I was a student taking your course, which I don't think I would actually qualify because I am a very, I do play the guitar a little bit, but you know, I don't play much at all. Would I be a candidate for your course?
Sure, anybody. You know, it's a person has to have the desire, the drive, and to be able to do that. Musical ability and talent is really a genetically inherited trait, and I can tell right away whether a person, you know, has a lot of musical ability or not. But that does not influence me one way or another, because if a person truly wants to learn music, I teach them. And I've seen people who really didn't have a lot of musical ability be able to flower and bloom and be able to play music and be happy and be satisfied and get a great deal of joy with playing. So
Okay, so that is what I think most people are looking for, is joy and peace and
absolutely.
a sense of internal rhythm. And so what would you say to people in regards to what the benefits of taking a course like this would be? What might they gain in their lives?
In the video series that is just coming out now, actually, I think that because I'm combining meditation with the music, I think that it has not just musical benefits for people, but also really personal benefits. I think it helps, the meditation part of it really can help center people.
Do you lead them in meditation?
I do, and sometimes
okay, so
sometimes
I'm
I
going to
use
put
music.
you on the spot.
Okay.
For our ending, lead me in 30 seconds of meditation.
Okay, all right.
What would you say to me?
Well,
I would immediately take my glasses off.
Yes, I want you to close your eyes and don't go to sleep. And I would say, focus on your breath going in and out.
Okay.
As you're doing that, I want you just to focus on that and that alone. And I want you to be very aware of the beginning of the thought. When you detect there's a thought, return your focus to your breath.
I honestly, the breathing just brought me into immediately such a place of relaxation. Very fast.
Focusing on our breath is a very important thing, and the reason is that's the first thing we're given. That's the first thing we do when we're born, and that's the last thing that we give up when we die. It's a very sacred form of life, isn't it?
Yes, yes. I just focused on the beginning and end of my breath.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually hard, and I'm not just saying this for illustration purposes, it was actually hard for me to grab a thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was almost like a distraction.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And as most people, when they start doing it, will find that they will start having thoughts. It's just natural. It's normal. A second awareness point I always teach my students when they're meditating is don't try not to think. I mean, try not to think of a thought, because if you're trying not to think, that's a form of thinking.
It's true.
It is true.
It's deep.
Because I remember
It's
when I first learned to
paradoxical.
meditate, I kept having thoughts, and I finally went, okay, don't think, don't think, don't think. Then I went, wait a minute, I'm thinking.
When did you first learn meditation?
Probably when I entered seminary in 1972. Yeah.
You have an enormously rich background of spirituality, and music is a form of spirituality.
Absolutely.
What does it do for you, music? That's a loaded question for you, Robert. I bet you could sit here for another hour and talk about what music does for you.
Yeah. Music has always been my primary form of therapy. Because if I'm troubled, if I'm having a hard time, I go in to a gig, and I sit down and I play. And I've learned to be able to focus all of my concentration on doing that. My thoughts that worry me during the day go, and at the end of the night I'm usually feeling better. Mm-hmm. Pack up all your cares and woes. Here I go.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
And what is the terminology that you use on your website? A path?
Yes. And people, if you're interested in looking at this, you simply go to improvisationandmeditation.com.
Okay.
And
Can we bring up that slide?
And
that informational slide?
Right. And the entire name is Improvisation and Meditation, a Spiritual Path to Music and Life. But it's just improvisationandmeditation.com.
So would you say that this can have a life-changing effect on...
I can hope so. I can certainly hope so, yeah. I offer the first 2 videos for free, so people can check it out and see if they're interested in going on. And this is by the way for all musicians play whatever instrument you play. It's not just for the piano, and it's also for all forms of music, because improvisation is certainly used in not just jazz music, but it's used in rock and roll, in pop music, in Latin music, in R&B,
Right.
in gospel music. Those are all forms of improvised music.
Right.
It's also for singers, by the way. You are a singer.
Right.
You've sung with me before.
Yes. I had
And
the
so
honor.
it's a course for singers as well as all instrumentalists.
Oh, okay. And so there's also an opportunity to meet other musicians, right?
Well, it's online.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
If people pursue it and start playing in a musical group, then they meet other musicians
Right.
for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But just knowing you opens up a door of opportunity to
I hope so.
interface with other musicians
Yeah.
and opportunities there. So we are going to wrap this up, and you're going to hear a piece of music at my outro to this show that Robert so kindly wrote for me. And I'm wrapping it up now. This is Ann Smollon. This is Come Together Conversations. And thank you, Robert, for being here today.
Thank you so much, Ann. I appreciate it.
I've really enjoyed it.
Me too.
Okay. Good night, folks.